Sacrifice, 2021. New H.P. Lovecraft inspired horror film starring Barbara Crampton, kind of the unofficial queen of the Lovecraft film adaptations. Let's talk about it here on Maniac Movies. I remember to do it this time. Updates Wednesdays and Fridays, and if I just feel like doing one any other time, but Wednesdays and Fridays consistently. So, yeah, like, share, and subscribe, and let's talk about this movie. So I had high hopes for this one. I did. I kind of, I mean, if you're a fan of H.P. Lovecraft, you know Barbara Crampton. If you're a fan of horror movies, you probably know Barbara Crampton. She's a scream queen. She is. She's a legit. She's been in a fair amount of classic flicks, and many of them were adapted from H.P. Lovecraft stories. She was in Body Double, which is totally an adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft. I'm joking. Yeah, no. Body Double is the deranged erotic thriller that Brian De Palma directed, but she was in it, and she was in the big three. She was in Re-Animator, From Beyond, and Castle Freak. And most people would say that those are about the three best direct Lovecraft adaptations. Now, The Color Out of Space, Richard Stanley's film, has probably been added to that list now, but for a long time, those were the three big boys. And she had a huge part in all of them. And yeah, she's a really good actress. She's one of those actresses that was sort of rather unfairly pigeonholed as a hot blonde. And she's actually a very, very good actress. I mean, if you've seen her movies, you know like she has legit range. Like From Beyond, she has a really good character arc in that movie. Castle Freak, that's a straight up dramatic role. You're Next, that scene in You're Next when the home invasion movie with the guys with the animal masks that Adam Wingard directed. The scene where she sees her daughter die, like, I mean, Meryl Streep couldn't have done any better. Like, it's legit. Like her response to her daughter dying is right up there with, say, Sean Penn's response to his daughter being found dead in Mystic River, which won him an Oscar. Like, it was unfair that people pretty much dismissed her as, oh, that's a pretty blonde that's willing to do nudity. Let's give her a pretty blonde that's willing to do nudity roles. Here's Chopping Mall. And Chopping Mall isn't an awful film, but, it's not going to get you on Hollywood's radar. So, this movie, Sacrifice, is not a direct Lovecraft adaptation. It's inspired by a short story by a guy named Paul Kane, who I'm not familiar with, and I'm not surprised I'm not familiar with him, because from what I can tell, this short story is only available in an e-novel called a collection of shorts this guy wrote called The Color of Madness. I couldn't find a solid media version of it. So yeah, it's apparently not an especially well-known, I'd never heard of it. And yeah, so they went with the instead of the short stories title, which was Men of the Cloth, which I don't get from this movie, so maybe the short story was significantly different. They went with the most generic, nothing. If you search it, you're gonna find 40 movies this year called Sacrifice title. Whenever I think of Sacrifice, I think of that Michael Madsen movie where the serial killer was targeting women that were getting abortions. But yeah, so we have yet another movie called Sacrifice. And seriously, what is up with these boring, lame, no effort given, one-word titles? Sacrifice. All right. Yeah, that's not gonna grab me with it. Yeah, whatever. And the poster sucks too. But I was still hopeful about this because Barbara Crampton has a good track record. Whether the movie's good or bad, it's interesting. She doesn't have a lot of in one ear out the other movies. When she decides to become involved in a flick, it's usually an interesting flick, even if it's bad. I mean, Death House is a terrible movie, but it was an interestingly bad movie. I've heard people make the argument that Death House is the worst film ever made, which it's not by a long shot, but it's a bad and it's a mess, but it's an interesting mess, and I do not regret watching it. She was in We Are Still Here. She was in You're Next. She was in Dead Night. She was in Death House. She was in what else? Well, she's in that new movie Run, Hide, Fight, the one that I'm hearing very good things about. Apparently, people really like this movie. It's that flick they're describing as Die Hard in a school. It's got Thomas Jane in it too, and I usually like him, dude from The Punisher and The Mist. So yeah, I really want to see that. I haven't made the time to see that yet. Instead, I watched Sacrifice, and maybe you're getting the point by now that I was really disappointed in this. So Sacrifice is a community with a secret story. Like, the community with a secret subgenre is one that no one really talks about, but these movies were very popular really up until the early 90s. They dropped off a good bit and they were brought back by Get Out and then Midsommar a little bit after. So the community with the secret formula goes back at least to Rosemary's Baby and probably before that. And the basic idea is a couple moves into a new community that seems too good to be true. Everyone's happy and everything's perfect, and but there's always this undercurrent of weirdness. It's very forced pleasant. It's very like, "Hi, we're so glad to see you. It's so great having new people here. Here's an apple pie we just baked. Here's a welcoming bouquet. And if you step one toe out of line, we're gonna fucking tear your heart out and eat it." it always has like I mean, Midsommar is the ultimate example of this. Like, people just blissed out on acid everywhere? But you can just tell that things ain't right here. Get Out also, where that famous moment where they're trying to be overly polite to the only black guy in the area, like, I would have voted for Barack Obama a third. Yeah, shut the hell up, idiot. Like, but yeah, so this is a community with a secret movie, and they have a very rigid formula. It's almost always a couple. Sometimes they have kids, sometimes not. These people, the wife is pregnant, so they don't have a kid yet. But and I keep saying she's due in like a month. Who moves with 30 days left before you're like that? That's irresponsible, especially because this island. Well, it's not. I mean, it's Norway, but so anyway, they're an American couple that go to Norway because the husband finds out that he's inherited a house, that his mom has died, and we see in a cold open that his mom fled this place in cover of night. So yeah, clearly there was a reason she left, and she didn't tell him about this. But yeah, so they go back to this place, and they're basically just gonna try and flip the house. Essentially, they don't plan on living there. They're just gonna try and fix up the house and resell it. But once they get there, they find out from Officer Barbara Crampton, who looks like she just wandered off the set of Puppet Master Littlest Reich. Another interesting movie. It wasn't exactly a good movie, but it was interesting. So she's a cop, and they find out that there was an incident, and that essentially the mom was suspected of murdering the dad, and then she fled. So it gives the husband. I didn't learn anyone's names in this thing. Like a new outlook on his life and on this situation. And so we start getting cliches left and right where people are being way too nice. You have one they get invited to dinner at Barbara Crampton's house, and Barbara Crampton is doing the whole thing of really really pleasant. Oh wait, you said something I didn't like death glare for 2 seconds. Really really pleasant again, like that whole yeah. This is clearly a villain, but you don't have to watch too many movies to figure this out. And they go to the local bar, and of course, I mean, they all but threaten to rape his pregnant wife before they find out he's a local. And they're like, "Oh, you're from here? No, no, come on, it's cool. Let's have a beer." So anyway, they find out that this place has a whole bunch of weird local traditions, a lot like Midsommar, and one of them is that they kind of worship the Slumbering One, which for any fan of H.P. Lovecraft is going to make them think of Yog-Sothoth. I don't think they ever use that term. They called it something. It sounded kind of like Yog-Sothoth, but not. It's like Yemenet. Maybe it's a Norwegian word. I don't speak Norwegian. And Barbara Crampton's Norwegian accent, by the way, is fine. Apparently, she worked with a dialect coach. And yeah, I knew people from this basic area, not from Norway, actually from Iceland, which I know Iceland isn't that close to Norway, but I don't know, the accents in that whole just region of ultra white, fair skinned people in like really green, underdeveloped, well not underdeveloped, but like underpopulated. They're not densely populated areas like Norway, Sweden, the Netherlands. Anyway, all those accents kind of sound similar to me. And Barbara Crampton sounded fine. Uh, Most of the other actors are Norwegian, and the two leads are actually British, putting on American accents, and the husband's accent is perfectly solid. The wife slips a little bit, but it's fine. The acting in this movie isn't a problem. Anyway, they get all invited to Barbara Crampton's place, and this is a big cliche in these type of movies: is that someone tries to seduce one of the people in the couple, and it's Barbara Crampton's daughter, who seems to be mute, but she's just straight up giving him fuck me eyes the entire dinner, and the wife is like, right here, pregnant too, right next to him. So this is very common. The weird hostility that immediately flips to weird acceptance is very common. The overly nice, welcoming person who's clearly a psycho, Barbara Crampton, is very like these are all cliches, and I'm not gonna fault the movie on that necessarily because like I said, like a movie doesn't have to be utterly original to be good, and a movie can have cliches and still be good, but a movie needs to have things happening and needs to have interesting characters, and this has neither of those. Like, there's one scene where they find a Cthulhu plushie in their house, and this is treated like some sinister omen. I'm sitting there thinking that looks like a cat toy. And the wife keeps having these annoying ass fake out dream sequences, and any fan of horror hates fake out dream sequences even more than they hate fake out jump scares. Now, fake out jump scares are bad. They're lame. You come around the corner, see someone there you didn't expect, you go ah, and then the music gets loud and the audience supposed to go ah. And jump scares almost never work for me anyway, so I hate jump scares. I hate jump scare movies. But again, not because they scare me, but because they do nothing for me. A jump scare to me is the equivalent of waving keys in my face. It's like, okay, what? I'm not two. This stopped impressing me when I was 12. But fake out dream sequences are so lame and such a time waster because all it is they couldn't think of any way to keep their story progressing and have a scare. So they just let's just have a nightmare, and then anything can happen, and then it didn't happen, and you can tell like each time that it's gonna be a fake out. It's so lame, and again, these characters aren't especially interesting. The husband becomes actively unlikable as the movie goes on, and this is a cliche that I've had people point out to me where movies more and more are having the guy, like the male lead, be a colossal prick. Just like for no reason. And this guy is such a dick to his pregnant wife. Like they're supposed to be moving there to flip this house and they're going back home, period. This is another country. Like they were and then he just starts saying, well, maybe I'm thinking about staying. It's like, dude, your wife's having a baby in a month. This is not the time to uproot your entire life. And she doesn't want to at all. He's like, why? Everything's so great here. What do you want to go back home where our friends and family are? And she's like, yeah, that's exactly what I want to do. He's like, well, you're just prejudiced. You're just being a bitch. Like, he's just he initially seems like a perfectly normal guy, but he just becomes more and more of a dick as it goes on to the point where it's like, is he just gonna shove his pregnant wife down the stairs at some point? Like, what is wrong with this guy? And he maybe cheats on her with the Barbara Crampton's daughter. And here's something that's bad. If in the entire movie the best scene by far is the random frontal nude scene with the pretty girl, you made a crappy film. Because that's this movie sucked. Like when that happened, I was like, hey, look, something's happening that's holding my interest for because I was probably 50 minutes into this movie and I was thinking, man, this is a slow burn. And then I looked at the time count. I was like, we are better than halfway through this movie. And I'm bored and nothing's happening. And I kept watching it because I felt like this is one of those movies that might have like an amazing ending, like that movie Hunter x Hunter that just came out, where yeah, the movie's pretty boring, but it's almost kind of made worth it by the last 10 minutes of the movie. You know, Hereditary, which isn't a boring movie by any stretch of the imagination, but Hereditary, you know, the first 3 quarters of that movie are fairly slow, but the third act more than makes up for it. The Hereditary is an A film. And that's what I was thinking. Is like, okay, maybe this movie's gonna completely blow me away in the end, and it completely didn't. The ending is just like, fine, whatever. I don't care. I didn't like these characters. I could easily tell that this was a cult. This is just this movie sucked. And I was really kind of hoping for it to at least be monumentally bad. Like I said, like most of Barbara Crampton's movies are at least interesting, but this just sucked. There's nothing here. Lovecraft fans will. There's not. It's just nothing here. The only people who might get any pleasure out of this are like Barbara Crampton's most diehard of diehard fans, or people that just like Norway. I mean, Norway is a beautiful country. It's very unspoiled, and there's some great cinematography in this movie. And that's another thing that's frustrating about this movie is that because everything's more or less on point, it's well shot, it's well edited, it's well acted. That I it tricks you into thinking that it's a good movie. Like I said, I was almost an hour into this movie when I was finally like, this sucks. Yeah, this sucks. Because I kept thinking it's gonna pick up, it's gonna get good. We're going somewhere, and we're not. So yeah, Sacrifice, terrible movie, very disappointing. I like Barbara Crampton though, so I guess I'm not completely. I wish I'd watched Run Hide Fight instead, honestly. But that's all I got.